My name is Eugene DePasquale, Pennsylvania Auditor General, here with Mayor Peduto and his team. We've recently completed our audit of the Pittsburgh's 3 municipal pension, which would be police, fire, and non-uniformed. And we're here today, as you know, we announced the beginning of the audit, and this is where I first talked about our municipal pension report. And so we're here to talk about not only the completion of the audit, but where things stand in Pennsylvania and where they need to go. The starting point that you should realize with the completion of our audit is that the city of Pittsburgh has done everything just about that we have asked them to do in the past, and financially speaking is actually doing more than has been asked as far as putting revenue into their pension from parking and casino sources of revenue. They lowered their anticipated rate of return, and they are again putting more money in than even the MMO mandatory municipal obligation would require them to do. And even with that, they are still falling behind. Their funded ratio, which is sort of the percentage of their unfunded liability, went from 62% in 2011 to 58% in 2013. This is largely due to the fact that the city lowered its investment return assumption from 8 to 7.5. But having said that, again, I'm going to stress this a couple times. Putting more money in than they were required to do and doing practically everything that they've been asked to do, and in a booming stock market. Remember, the last couple of years we've had a booming stock market. Certainly in the period of this audit, the two-year period of this audit, the stock market has been increasing, still falling behind. As of January 1st, 2013, the Pittsburgh Pension Fund had assets of $675 million of assets and liabilities. The amount needed to meet current and future pension obligations is $1.16 billion. This issue, the issue with the financial stability of municipal pensions, is not just a Pittsburgh or a big city issue. It is a statewide issue. And frankly, it is a national issue. Once again, I am calling on the state legislature to take action. I was heartened by the governor's, including pension reform, in his budget address yesterday. I believe he knows this is an issue that needs to be addressed. I have been touting pension challenges all over the state. Recently, we were in the city of Scranton to announce, unfortunately, that without statewide pension reform, the city of Scranton will go bankrupt within the next 2 to 4 years. The Scranton Fire Pension Fund, and I'm not making this up, is 16% funded. 16%. There is just shy of $8 billion in Pennsylvania of unfunded municipal pension obligations. Now, the reason why I believe, not just from a financial standpoint, but from a moral standpoint, why the legislature and the governor are certainly working in partnership with mayors of Republican and Democratic mayors all over the state, why we need to address this. Saw what happened in Detroit. City declares bankruptcy, goes before a bankruptcy judge, and the retirees who were basically banking on that money, bankruptcy judge orders them to get 10 cents on the dollar. The human toll on that is devastating. People lose their homes. The economy is damaged in those areas. I believe we should have the courage in Pennsylvania to act before that happens. And every day that goes by, every day, the problem gets more financially difficult. Again, I want to applaud the mayor and his team on the great work they have done using parking tax revenue and casino revenues, basically pouring money into the system. We have some cities, city of Bradford, Pennsylvania. Just to give you an idea, again, it's not all big cities. The city of Bradford, Pennsylvania, 1/3, let me repeat that, 1/3 of all their general tax revenue goes into just to pay their mandatory municipal obligation. So that's before they pay one cop, one firefighter before they fix one park bench. 1/3 of their general fund revenue pays for their mandatory municipal obligation for their pensions. But as I said before, what Pittsburgh is doing now simply is not enough. We all need to work together. The mayor talked a little bit about it, but Republicans and Democrats from the local government side, mayors from all over the state are working together on this issue. We need a comprehensive solution to this. And again, I want to commend the mayor and his team for moving in the direction that we've asked them to move. There are a couple other issues on benefit calculations that we did find in our audit that from a previous audit had not been corrected through ordinance, and it would take an ordinance. The mayor and his team has now drafted those ordinances. I believe they're working with city council now on making sure that those ordinances go through so that the benefit calculations can be more in line with what we feel are the appropriate benefits moving forward. So with that, certainly the mayor and his team are going to offer a few comments. I appreciate you being here, and then when they're done, I'm going to be more than happy to take any questions about this or anything else you want to talk about.
Thank you. This is a speech we all need to hear. I'm Paul Legger. I'm the finance director. I am also the executive director of the pension fund, and I'm a city pensioner, so I have a personal investment in this. I'm not receiving a pension right now because I'm back at work. What we need to know is that while the pension is an obligation we've made to employees, it's also a financial black hole. The way the pension is structured is that last year we put 11.3% of our budget into the pension. This year we put 12.9% into our budget. But that doesn't sound like a big leap, but you need to remember that we actually increased our budget because of truth in budgeting by $28 million. So if we had kept the same budget level, we would be increasing to around 13%. Every year I expect this to go up as a percent of the city operating budget. And unless we make some changes, and there are many changes that can be made, we cannot possibly continue to do this. We can get to situations like Scranton where we would be required to put in half the budget or more into pension obligations. That's just not acceptable to the taxpayers. It's not acceptable to the pensioners because it risks their benefit long run, and it's not an acceptable way to run the government. And I can talk more afterwards about individual financial information, but the mayor can make comments now on the program he's put together to try and manage pensions.
Thanks. First, I want to thank the Auditor General for doing this, not only for Pittsburgh and not only for the older communities all throughout the state of Pennsylvania, but for all Pennsylvanians. We have a system that's broken, and the system needs to be reformed. You know, we did all that we could within our first year in office to be able to take care of the things that we had the ability to take care of without asking for any help from any outside source. Over this next year, what we need to do are two major things. Number one is we need to have a strong partnership with our nonprofits, mainly the large institutions, to be able to pay their fair share into a new program. And number two, we need to get common sense pension reform completed in Harrisburg. And let me be clear about it, because the Auditor General knows it by the numbers. I know it from the conversations with other mayors and council members from across Pennsylvania. Without reform from Harrisburg, older communities throughout Pennsylvania will face pension crisis and inevitably bankruptcy. We've created a cottage industry in the state through Act 47 in order to be able to have financially distressed city after city apply. And with 20 cities already under it and another 25 eligible for it, it should be all the warning calls that are needed in order to make these common sense reforms. But unfortunately, it isn't. That's why Democratic mayors and Republican mayors throughout the state of Pennsylvania, joined by Democratic and Republican council members, are going united to the governor and to the state legislature with common sense reforms. I had to write them down because there's a few, but each of them cover an area that needs to be a part of a whole plan to be able to solve this problem. Number one, and it's important to note, all current employees are held harmless, meaning what you were promised is what you're going to be able to get. And they retain their existing rights and benefits at the current levels. Number two, for new hires only, the shift to a cash balance hybrid plan, a balanced and financially sustainable approach that includes aspects of both a defined benefit and a defined contribution plan. Number three, it authorizes an optional 457 plan as an additional employee retirement tool. Number four, it requires pensions to be calculated on base pay in only a small percent of overtime. This will curb the practice of spiking or increasing the final average salary with excessive overtime and unused sick or vacation days. Number four, it removes the pension benefits from the collective bargaining process. Number five, it establishes a pension plan portability options for new hires. So if you should work for the city and then go to the county, or work for one municipality and then work with another, your pension plan would be able to follow you. It improves the job and pension security for uniformed unions. Those that are in police and fire, which have their own, face the same challenges to be able to sustain that pension plan for their existing employees. Without any changes to new employees, will never be able to see the pension plans fully paid. And finally, we need to create a new state law on how the reimbursement formula is given to municipalities. There needs to be a match, not simply a payment that's given to municipalities. Not all municipalities are equal when it comes to how many people they have on their pension plans. Many have been created in the past 30 or 40 years that were once cornfields, and the state money that comes to them pays 100% of the plan, while older communities throughout the state of Pennsylvania who have more retirees than employees are forced to pay not only taxpayer dollars but employee contributions and other amounts, and still not be able to keep our head above the water. Without change, without common sense reform from Harrisburg, the state municipal pension plan is doomed to fail. And we are not given the authority, nor the power, nor the options by the state legislature to be able to control what that journey is. And we can't just completely tax people, because all we'll be doing is forcing them out to the newer areas with less of a burden because they didn't have the employees years ago. It's a cycle that will hurt not only older communities but all of Pennsylvania in creating an unsustainable environment for all. So for tackling this issue, for taking it on, for trying to build the consensus with not only local leaders but legislative leaders in Harrisburg, and for recognizing that without these changes, the problem will never be solved. I just have to take a moment to thank Eugene DePasquale for his leadership.
Thanks. Thanks, Mayor. Any questions?
You said that the city is doing just about, and the city is doing practically everything that you've recommended following your audits. What are those other things they're not doing that you like to see?
The ordinances, specifically I was talking about the ordinances with the benefit calculations had not been done from our previous audit that, again, did not get completed. But we've seen now, we've worked with them on their now draft. They may even be completed and ready for council submission. I'm not sure about that. But those were the items that had not been completed that we wanted to see, that they've now begun the process of getting those to council.
And then what will those ordinances say? I mean, are you your recalculation up or down, or how will it?
They really don't have any financial impact at all. What this is taking the terms of collective bargaining agreements, putting them in the city code where they have not been before. So we're already paying those costs. This is just a technical correction.
What kind of impact does this have on employees, future employees of the city, in terms of bringing outsiders, bringing folks who are in the city, getting them to work for the city of Pittsburgh? What kind of impact will they see in their checks?
I think if this is done right, I think it would be minimal at best. I think, but when you're talking about broadly speaking for the future of the city, and I can tell you what's happening in some other cities. I think, look, I grew up here. Pittsburgh has some of the best parks in the world. if you end up having to put more money into your pension, that's less money that's available for parks. It's less money available for public safety, more fire, more police. So the quality of life, if this is not tackled, the quality of life for the whole city, I think would be in very perilous shape without addressing this in a fair and common sense way. So yes, I think that there is some give and take with all this with on the employee side of it. But I think that if this is done in a fair way, this would still be a very attractive place for people to work.
Mayor, you mentioned two things have to happen. One, greater commitment. Greater commitment from nonprofits, and two, help from Harrisburg. Okay, are you any closer to getting a commitment from the nonprofits in terms of this? And where are you with those talks?
Most recent talk was yesterday, and we had the Big Four in this conference room with Chief of Staff Ackland. Went through again policies that both sides could agree to, and those where we still have difference. And our next meeting is to have a draft of a proposal. I don't want to call it an agreement because we're still not at an agreement. But comparing it to a year ago at this time when we couldn't even get a meeting or schedule a discussion because no one was willing to talk because of counter lawsuits against each other, we have moved mountains.
Does it still look like, rather than a cash payment, an in-kind kind of hybrid?
Yes, yes. It would not be a cash payment to the city that would go into a black hole, but instead would be an agreement that would work on two critical areas. One, the legacy costs of the city, which would include pension, capital, and debt. And two, the ability to work together on building out the new parts of our economy while also trying to bring the neighborhoods that have been left behind as a part of it. So it would have a dual focus of taking care of costs of the past while trying to build the city of the future. And it would be more aligned in creation like the Pittsburgh Promise than what we had seen in the past with a pilot, than a strict pilot.
An example of how a UPMC or I think the Big Four, UPMC, CMU, IMARC, what's the fourth?
Pitt.
How one of those would be able to help the city with capital when it takes cash to do that, capital or pensions or...
It would be basically that there would be representatives from each that would look on an annual basis of what the city's needs are and where the goals of not only dealing with the past but trying to build towards the future. And just as the Promise Board works in creating a program, that would work in a similar way. But at this point, the details of it still are forthcoming. There's just been the general discussion back and forth between the four institutions and our administration. So it's still too early to say. I'm hopeful that the conversations continue the way that they have been since last, I'd say, September or so. They've been very positive.
What's the latest with the parking? Since it was the parking plan that sort of rescued the pension fund a couple of years ago, when the state was threatening to take it over if you didn't raise it. Are you still considering nighttime enforcement to help raise additional monies for the pension plan? What's happening with the parking?
No, we gave council almost an a la carte menu of options to be able to get to where we wanted to be able to get to. Other than Councilman Kraus, who wanted to see the nighttime enforcement in the south side, the other areas that had been discussed, the North Shore and the downtown, Councilman Lavelle and Councilman Harris were opposed to it, and we respected their ability to find other options through Councilman O'Connor and Councilman Gilman on what's that called? Dynamic pricing.
Do you have a goal for when you might come to an agreement with the nonprofit?
Within my lifetime. That's what I say when I talk about an LRT. No, it's we're good for the next 5 years on swimming with our head barely above the water, but in order to be able to do much more than that and looking at something that goes beyond our just basic operating and capital budget, we need that partnership with them. I don't know if I could say the same without the reform coming from Harrisburg in the next 5 years. By the trajectory that the Auditor General has shown for this city and the examples that he has been able to highlight in other cities, I don't think we have that type of time frame. We have to get that done immediately.
Mr. Mayor, you mentioned a list of reforms that are backed by Republican and Democratic mayors. Can you tell us who they are, what cities they represent? Sure.
I can get a list for you this afternoon. Pennsylvania Municipal League has a bunch of signatories onto it, including myself. And there are a number that were a part of a group a few years ago called the Cities in Crisis Committee. Great name for a group, but who also all signed off on it.
And then, again, I don't want to speak for them, but I do know that I'm not talking about the statewide chamber, not that they're opposed to this, but the local chambers in each of these communities have been a vigorous part of this discussion as well. I mean, to be blunt, a lot of mayors are Democrats and a lot of chamber folks are, probably it's not 100% on either side, but this is to show that, you know, this is an issue that's breaking down a lot of ideological barriers, because I do know that, you know, take, for instance, the community I live, York City, Mayor Bracey is a Democrat. Most of the chamber folks, not all, most are Republican, but they have both been a part of these discussions. You know, not so much knowing the party ID of the Greater Pittsburgh Chamber, but I know that Dennis Jablonski and his group in the Greater Pittsburgh Chamber is certainly, this is a major issue for them as well, because they get it. If a city is not able to pay the pension benefits and you end up going into bankruptcy, that is a black eye for everybody in that community, not just the city government, and everybody loses.
What makes you think the legislature might act on this when they've shown for years and years they haven't had the willpower to change?
It's a great question. I need to be relentless on this is number one. I mean, when we first started, you know, I became Auditor General in January of 2013, and what would happen is we would do a pension audit and you'd see this community is struggling, but it was never put in the broader context. So I'd like to think that when the mayor and I stood together and outlined our first ever statewide municipal report that showed the liability at that time was $6.7 billion, that helped raise the stakes. And we did that, to be blunt, we timed that up with a key port in the gubernatorial race to make it part of that discussion. And so as we move forward, I need to be relentless on the public relations side of it, to be blunt. But now we have real numbers. I don't know how any legislator in the Scranton area cannot be part of a pension solution when their municipality is staring bankruptcy in the face. Certainly, I know that the mayor has been as good as can be in reaching out to the legislators in this area. I don't know how legislators are going to look, you know, their voters in the eye as we're moving forward if this isn't addressed. And we have, I believe, an ally in the governor's office who's going to be working collaboratively to try to get this done. And certainly, we've seen. The majority party in Harrisburg, you have a Democratic governor, Republican legislators that have become more interested in this issue. Again, a lot of the Republican legislators don't represent cities. That's just, you know, it's just what mathematically it is. But a lot of them have begun to become more interested in the issue. Two reasons. Number one, I think some have just concluded it's the right thing to do. Two is there's just a financial component of it. If a city goes bankrupt, by the Pennsylvania Constitution, all municipalities are technically creatures of the state, which means the state would then have to deal with the liability. So again, the decision you need to make as a legislator is when do you want to deal with the consequence?
Mayor, if we do get some type of common sense pension reform in Harrisburg, but we don't get the support of any of the 4 nonprofits, would we still be okay?
Yes. The nonprofit contribution that we're putting together is not based on the operating budget and the day-to-day operations. It will help us to take care of our long-term debt issues, our capital budgets, and our pension plans. and also allow us to make the needed investments we need to within neighborhoods that haven't seen growth, job opportunities, and helping to spur even more growth in the areas that we see growth: technology, medicine, education. So the discussions we're having with them is not for their role to be able to fill a hole within the budget. We did that last year when we created the new budget and we had to come up with over $30 million in new revenue. We did that. We made sure that we'd be on solid ground so that now moving forward that would be a benefit to help us. However, the pension problem's only getting bigger. It's like being in a boat that's taking on water and you have the same bucket in a bigger and bigger hole, and the boat keeps sinking faster. If we don't get to the resolution and the state legislature fails to act, it won't only be Pittsburgh. It will be Washington, PA, and Butler, and Wilkes-Barre, and Scranton, in Erie, and Meadville, and Johnstown, and every other older community throughout this state, because the present system that they have is destined to fail.
Is it fair to say that, just back on that subject again, a healthcare provider like a UPMC could provide the city with a sort of in-kind service for, say, healthcare, and that would free up money in the general operating budget to put into pensions? Is that a good way to example?
That's really not what we're looking at right now. So we're not looking for services in lieu.
Okay.
We're looking for payments, but the payments would be used for specific purposes outside of the day-to-day operations of the city.
Mayor, what would you say to somebody considering working for the city but looking at this and being concerned?
I would say, first off, to every employee that is a present employee, we're going to make sure that what you're promised is what you get. And two, to every employee who would be coming in, that there will be a program available that would be competitive or better than the private sector.
Any other questions?
Everyone, thank you very much for your time. Really
Just one
appreciate
last thing I want to put on the record, because the question wasn't asked to me. Why do you think it's actually going to get done? Because for the first time, we have a quarterback in Harrisburg that's taken it on in a full responsibility of making it get done. And it's somebody who can walk into the governor's office as an ally, but simply the same way walk into Republican leadership's office with respect. And that's our state auditor general, and that's what's been missing.
Thank you, everyone.